Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. This is Working Out Through the New Testament, episode 39. It is the devotional where we are reading through the New Testament, and then we follow each scripture reading with a little workout of the day. This helps us to be intentional about spending time in God's Word, but it also gives us a little opportunity to reflect on our reading with our workout and to examine our own lives and think about ways that we can apply the truths that are taught in scriptures to our daily lives so that we can be built up not just physically, but most importantly, we're being built up spiritually and mentally through our reflection and application of the gospel message. So that being said, the scripture reading for today is Mark chapter 6. Scripture reading for today is Mark chapter 6. So the word of the day from Mark 6, the word of the day is that concept that I was thinking about, call it a concept of application, if you will, that I was thinking about during my workout. And so here's the word of the day. The Pandering Paradox Principle. The Pandering Paradox Principle. What a perfect alliteration to describe a problem that we see Christianity has. A paradox, if you will. We see it take place in three different examples in this chapter. So let's just very briefly define our key words of the day. So what is pandering? Pandering is when you cater to someone's desires. Usually, I won't necessarily say always, but usually pandering has a negative connotation. Because usually you are catering to someone's desires because you yourself don't stand for any single principle, so you will change your values in order to gain favor with someone else. Most prominently, you have politicians that will get on their party platform, and when they're behind the podium and they're politicking to their people, they change what their priorities are. I want you to count the P's in those last two sentences. That was completely accidental, but it was kind of fun. So the politician goes to one state and they say, we want higher taxes. And the politician goes to the next state and they says, I'm going to get you lower taxes. So they're pandering to their audience. Usually not a good thing. Well, are we supposed to do this as Christians? Well, I want to pin that thought for a second. But I will say that when we started the book of Mark out, I did just a little intro section describing why we have four different gospels. We have four different gospels because the life and the ministry of Jesus is being described from four different perspectives by four different people, and each gospel was written to with a different audience in mind. So the gospel writers were highlighting different aspects of who Jesus was and what his teachings were in order to be more readily understood by their audience. Now, is this pandering? Well, I'm going to argue that it's not. I don't have time to go into all the reasons why in this short devotional. But boy, it sure can seem like it, especially when you have Paul writes that he became all things to all people. Boy, that sounds a lot like pandering too, doesn't it? So, like I said, pin that thought. Move to the next point. Paradox. Paradox is when you have two seemingly conflicting things that yet somehow work or are a disjunction. So I'll give you an example. So in fitness, a paradox is how one of the best ways to increase your cardiovascular capability, one of the best ways to increase, say, your 2-mile time if you're trying to take a fitness test is not by just going out and running every single day. I used to think this way. I used to think, oh, if I want to get faster on my 2 miles, so I just need to go out and run 2 miles as hard as I can every single day. Because that's what makes sense. But no. In the fitness world, there's this little paradox. It might even have an official name. I don't know. We'll call it the runner's paradox. Where the best way to increase your cardio capacity and improve your 2-mile time is through interval training. So by doing a sprint workout and by taking rest days, you're actually increasing your distance running. It's a paradox. It doesn't really make sense, but it works that way. Let's think of another example. Okay, here's a good one. Everybody will be able to appreciate this one. Here's a paradox. Social media actually disconnects us. You would think that a media titled social, because it's designed to bring people together, would actually bring people together. You can do any number of web searches and find all kinds of studies that have found more time on social media means less time being social. We're actually becoming disconnected because of social media. So, what is the paradox of Christianity? Well, I'd say the paradox is that we have to find a way to harmonize loving everybody, to include our enemies, to always presenting the gospel with a gentle and kind spirit, but yet knowingly doing so while offending people, because the gospel is offensive. I mean, you try telling somebody to change the way they're going to live they're supposed to live their life, you're going to offend people. You're going to make enemies. So hold up, you mean that I have to offend someone lovingly? Well, yes, honestly. That's why it's a paradox. And so the harmonization, of course, comes from true love is obeying God's commands. True love is putting a person's soul first and loving their soul more than you love the pleasures of their flesh. But that's a very difficult principle. Principle, our last key word here, meaning an overarching theme or concept, an umbrella term, which can be applied in many different applications and in many different scenarios, but it's kind of this guiding philosophy. The principle of Christianity is that we're to love God first and love our neighbor second. And that the final command of Jesus, the Great Commission, is to go forth and to teach his commands, baptizing and making disciples amongst all nations, amongst all people, even if it offends them. This is why I say Mark chapter 6, the word of the day is the Pandering Paradox Principle, because we see three examples of this happening in this chapter. We see the first example comes with Jesus. He returns to Nazareth, his hometown, where many of these people, probably the majority of these people, they know Jesus. They knew his parents, they knew his brothers and sisters, they knew his siblings. They probably saw Jesus growing up from a little boy up to a young adult, up to a man. And yet they reject him. And what is his response? Well, we see he pretty much stopped his ministry in Nazareth. We know that he healed a few people, we're told that he did, but then he just goes about other villages, preaching and teaching and working miracles and healing. So he goes to Nazareth, and they reject him, and then he leaves them. Well, that's pretty offensive, isn't it, Jesus? Where you went and you told a message, and then you just left them in the dust. You see, we have this mindset too often in Christianity that we have to bend over backwards in order to please people, in order to be attractive to them, to pull them into the gospel message. Where we start making excuses and we start making exceptions and we say, okay, you like doing this sin, you like living this lifestyle, so I tell you what, let's cut a deal. I'll allow you to continue in this. I'll just ignore these passages in Scripture that say you have to abide by these rules if you start coming to my church. You can live your lifestyle the way that you want to as long as you come to my church. That's what I have to offer you. I would say that's pandering. I would say that's pandering when we start bending over backwards, when we start trying to love people's flesh more than their souls, and we start trying to make exceptions in the gospel in order to be attractive to people. That's pandering. We see Jesus didn't pander. So what about that second example? That second example is then right after this, he goes and he tells his apostles to do basically exactly what he did. He says, okay, Gospels, I'm taking the leash off. Go get them. You've got the power to work miracles now. You know me. You know the truth. Go preach and teach. Work miracles. But if they don't receive you, then you need to shake the dust off your feet. Shaking the dust off your feet was kind of a bit of a show of force. Well, of mental, intellectual force. So this is kind of a first century idiom. It was kind of like, let's kind of put this in modern day terms. It's kind of like shutting the door on somebody. It's kind of like slamming the door in somebody's face because they offended you. So Jesus is basically saying, okay, apostles, so if they don't accept you, if they shut the intellectual door on you and they don't receive your words, my words through you, they don't receive you in my name, they have shut the door. So what I want you to do is I want you to shake the dust off of your feet. That way you make it abundantly clear that they are the ones who denied you, and now you are having nothing else to do with them. You're making it known that they had their opportunity, and now you are moving on to focus on someone else. He didn't tell his apostles to pander to people's pleasures. That's another alliteration. I'm not doing this on purpose. He didn't authorize pandering. He authorized standing for the truth. So what about that third example? John the Baptist. Holy smokes. What a prime example of the pandering paradox. Because John the Baptist, he's proclaiming God's intentions for marriage, and in so doing, he offends King Herod's wife, Herodias, because they are in an unlawful marriage. So John the Baptist, he's preaching and he's standing firm for the word. And you know what, King Herod? He actually has a respect for John. He's interested in what John has to say. He has a fearful respect because he recognizes John is a man of God. And so we see that he didn't offend Herod, even though he stood firm for the truth, But then his wife, his unlawful wife, Herodias, is deeply offended. So deeply offended that she has John the Baptist killed. That's how offended she was. She was so offended that she had John the Baptist murdered. John could have easily pandered to Herodias, and he said, you know what? I think I've got Herod almost hooked on the gospel. But Herodias, you know what? Maybe if I just don't preach on unlawful marriage today, maybe if I just let that one slide, maybe I can attract Herodias to who Christ really is. And maybe after being attracted to who Christ really is, maybe we can change our minds on other things. Nope, he stood pretty firm on his teaching on marriage, and it got him killed. The Pandering Paradox Principle. How are we as Christians to proclaim the gospel message at times and in times when we know it will offend people, but yet we still have to do so lovingly, to lovingly offend? That is the Christian paradox. It is up to us to not stoop to the level of pandering like the politicians. It's up to us to live out this paradox and to do it dutifully by being intentional and vigilant. So that is our challenge, to recognize the people in our lives, to recognize when they need to hear the truth, but then identify ways that we can preach that truth to them in the most loving, respectful way that we can, so that hopefully they won't shut the door on us. Because I've been guilty of committing a paradoxical sin on both sides. There have been times I have completely neglected to teach the truth because I didn't want to offend people. But then there, on the other side, I have went too far and I have preached way too harshly. I had the wrong heart and the wrong attitude when I was preaching and teaching others. And I offended people way before I really even got a chance to show the heart of the gospel message. I've been guilty on both sides, and so we have to find a balance and how to harmonize these things. So that is our challenge. Think about the people in your lives and how to best take this approach so that we are always standing firm for the truth, but always doing so lovingly, even if it might offend somebody. So the workout of the day, we're continuing with our recovery week. 30 minutes of a light activity of your choice, and then 30 minutes of intentional stretching to get all that soreness out. That's it, guys. Take care. Love y'all. Keep the faith. Keep the fit. God bless.